Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and today I'm going to be talking about arguably one of the most divisive games in this entire generation of games, No Man's Sky, which just released its latest content update, No Man's Sky Next. And it's received a lot of publicity over the last week, and anyone who hasn't heard of No Man's Sky, I'm not really sure where you've been the last few years, because this is one of the most well-publicized games and one of the most well-publicized failures in recent memory when it comes to gaming especially. This is a game that was brought out on stage at E3 and given prime showcase for years on end. This was a game that was showcased at the Video Game Awards multiple times. This is a game that even had the developer on late night television on the Stephen Colbert Show talking about this game. How many developers get to talk about their game and hype their game on late night television? Not too many. So this is a game that people, even who don't play games, knows about. And like I said, this game fell flat on its face harder than pretty much any game this entire generation. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my feelings about the game as someone who had played the game at launch and now has gone back and played the update. And after that, I kind of want to get into the reception of the update now, and I want to talk about the media reception that we're seeing now and how Sean Murray seems to be handling things now in 2018. And that's really what the meat of this video is going to be about. But first, I want to get into sort of my history with the game. So when the game first was announced and we started seeing all those trailers coming out and people were starting to get really excited and really hyped for the game, I was one of the people saying, I don't know where this game. What's the game? What are we going to be doing? It seems like a lot of colors and a lot of moving around and flying from planet to planet, but I didn't really see too much of a game there. And everyone was assuring me, no, you're wrong. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. It's going to be this. And I never saw it. And the more they kept showing it, the more I just kept saying, okay, as the years go by, I'm still not seeing where the game is here. And everyone was still, hyped about the game. People were really excited about it. And then when the game finally came out and it didn't live up to the expectations of all the people who were really excited for it, I didn't feel happy about that for their sake. But at the same time, it was a situation where I was like, hey, I've been saying this for years now, and this is pretty much exactly what I expected this game to be. So I'm not someone who pre-ordered the game. I was certainly not hyped for the game beforehand, but I ended up buying the game after all the reviews came out because, quite frankly, I wanted to see if it was quite as bad as people were making it out to be, because people were talking about it like it was just horrendous. And so I got the game, and I played dozens of hours, and I even platinumed it. So I put my time into the game, and after playing it for dozens and dozens of hours, I have to say the initial responses to me were pretty accurate. I didn't think it was that good of a game, and certainly the technological aspects of creating this world is mind-blowing. It really is. You can't deny that. The scope of the game is unparalleled as far as I'm concerned. And so you can't fault them for the concept of the game. The execution, however, from my own experience, I had the game crash on me, hard crash 30 times in a week when it launched. And coincidentally, after this latest update, even still today, before I recorded this, had multiple crashes. So it's still an issue that is not fixed, even with this new update. But I'm not onto the new update yet. Let's talk about the old game still. So the problem that people really had with the original launch of the game was not necessarily the game itself, although there were problems that people had with it, which were totally legitimate. Clunky inventory. A lot of weird phasing, pop-in sort of things when you're going on planets. Technical problems, like I said, hard crashes. All sorts of different issues that people had with the game at launch. But what people were really upset most with was they felt that they had been lied to by Sean Murray. And a lot of people were really upset about that. And I'm sure anyone watching this video knows it's well documented. There's Reddit threads, there's multiple videos you can watch about Sean Murray and people showing the lies, showing the game. And if anyone wants to get in and sugarcoat it and say he's not really lying, Okay, I know people like to do that when I talk about Bethesda as well. They say, well, those aren't really lies. You can use any sort of sugarcoating term you want. You can say misdirection, a little bit of deception, a little bit of misleading us. Any word you want to throw out to try to sugarcoat it, go look up the synonym in a thesaurus and you'll see the word lie in there too. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the word lie, because when you say something and it turns out to not be true, that's a lie. And like I said, I have no personal skin in this fight because I was not someone who was excited for the game. So I don't have any personal animosity towards Sean Murray about this in any other way other than I think it's a dirty business move what he did. And I know a lot of people like to say, oh, well, it's Sony. It's Sony's fault. It's Sony's fault. They pushed them into doing this. Okay, to those people, I want to ask you this. Were you aware that the publisher of No Man's Sky actually isn't Sony? It's Hello Games. This is a self-published game, at least digitally. Sony only handled the physical copy release. That's the only part of the publishing that was them. If you go and look it up, Hello Games self-published this game. It's very similar to how CD Projekt Red self-published The Witcher 3, but Warner Brothers published the game physically in North America. It's very similar. It's an indie studio, technically, that got help from a big publisher just to put the physical copy out. But if you look into this, Hello Games is the publisher of the game. So, I know a lot of people like to blame Sony, and I'm sure they had a bug in their ear. I'm sure they were pressuring them in some ways. I have no doubt of that. But people who like to put all the blame onto Sony, Hello Games is technically the publisher of the game. Check it out. Look it up. So, one of the biggest complaints that people had with the game, and one of the things we could most easily point to, was that multiple times Sean Murray had said that there's going to be multiplayer in the game. And then when the game launched, it was confirmed that there was no actual multiplayer. And this was something that was the most glaring omission. Everything else he could kind of say, well, how come this isn't in the game, or how come this isn't in the game? He was just saying, well, maybe it hasn't been discovered yet. But the fact that there was no multiplayer in the game was discovered right away by two players who found themselves in the same location on planets, and they couldn't see each other. And that's when right away the jig was up as far as that's concerned with No Man's Sky, and the cat was out of the bag, and everyone knew, oh, there is no actual multiplayer here. And what's funny is, for all the times and all the interviews and all the different press briefings when Sean Murray talked about there being multiplayer in the game, he did wait until the very last second to go onto Twitter. In fact, he waited until less than 12 hours before the game launched to tweet this. To be super clear, No Man's Sky is not a multiplayer game. Please don't go in looking for that experience. Once again, he tweeted this the day before the game launched in the afternoon time, the day before it launched, after multiple examples, multiple times of him telling us that there would be multiplayer in the game. So when it was revealed that there was no multiplayer, people were understandably and rightfully upset about that, because that was just shown outright to be a lie from Hello Games and from Sean Murray, and people were not pleased at all about that, and I can't really blame them. He was on stage multiple times talking about this. And then, so when the game came out, people had mixed reactions. There is still a community that plays the game, and they were still getting a lot of people that came back over time to play the different updates. There was the Atlas Rising update, the Pathfinder update, the Foundational update, and now we have this new overhaul update, which is called No Man's Sky Next. And every time they do one of these major updates, people would go back to play the game because people wanted to have faith in this game, because a lot of people liked the concept. And admittedly, there are some cool moments. Even in the old game, it was few and far between for me personally, but there was some redeeming moments of the game. And now going back and playing the update and seeing everything they've done, I have to say, the game is vastly improved. However, it's possible for a game to be both vastly improved and maybe still not be that great of a game. And that's kind of where I'm landing now. after sinking about 6 hours into my old save, and then I started a new character as well to sort of go through the tutorial again and sort of see what a new player would be experiencing as they went into the game. And I'll be honest, it's still a mixed bag, although I will say overall, I feel that it is greatly improved from where it was. I still don't think that this is a great game. But the graphical overhaul is phenomenal. If you have played the game before and you go back and play now, you will notice right away the graphical overhaul is really outstanding. They did a great job with that. I cannot complain about that, although there is still pop-in issues. It certainly was not anything too jarring for me, especially not like the way it used to be when you used to fly down onto a planet and everything was just popping. Now everything is much smoother. It's still there to a degree, but it's so much smoother. Everything looks better. Everything is more vibrant. Everything is clearer. And overall, it looks great. I can't complain about that. There's also a lot of new systems in place. And this is kind of where some of it's good, some of it's bad. There's new missions you can do, and some of this stuff has been updated throughout time. You can do base building now, which was added earlier on. There's vehicles you can have now on the planet's surface. This is all stuff that was added in past updates, but now it's all tied together. And one of the problems that I had was when I fired up my old save, most of my stuff had become obsolete. I still had my ship, but all my cool tech that I had with it, I couldn't use. It's just gone. I had a maxed out mining tool at one point with full slots with a different attachment in every slot. I mean, this thing was beast mode, okay? And then with the update, all of it got wiped out. And I'm talking, 20 out of my 24 slots, the attachments got wiped out. So, if you're going back to the game now, be aware of that. They kind of really screwed you over. I've never seen a game update where they take away pretty much all of your progress. I had 60 hours into the game. Yeah, 60 hours into the game, and now pretty much all my progress is wiped except I still had my ship. And I had the tool, but all the attachments were gone. I still had my suit, but most of it was inoperable. So, you did keep some of the raw materials. A lot of it you didn't keep. So, it was kind of a kick in the balls when I started the game up, and I saw, okay, so all that grinding and farming for materials that I had done before was essentially useless. And I don't really understand why they felt the need to wipe all of my progress like that. That, to me, was a terrible idea. Something else I didn't really love about the game is I think that the new tutorial is much more complicated than the original tutorial that the game launched with, and I feel like it's kind of off-putting to new players. To demonstrate that, I actually had a party today with two of my friends, one of whom has also platinumed the game, and one of whom who, like both of us, has also put in dozens of hours of the game. He hasn't platinumed it, but he's played it a lot. The guy who hasn't platinumed it is a big fan of the game. The other guy kind of feels like me. He's a little bit wishy-washy. He platinumed it and still didn't really love it. So when I was sitting there in the party, one of the guys was really excited, saying, "This is a whole new game. This is a whole new game. Oh, I can't believe this is a whole new game." Well, my other friend was sitting there and he was saying, "This is the same old games, the same old problems." And I kind of feel like they're both right. In a lot of ways, it is a new game. It looks much better. It feels more like a sequel than anything else. But on the other hand, it still retains a lot of the same issues. And in a lot of ways, it's more exasperated than it was before, because the grinding is a little bit worse now. When you go and you discover something on a planet, you can't, say you discover a crashed ship or whatever, or you find a crate of stuff. You can't just open it up now. Now you have to go and repair a panel to go do this so you can open up this door. And it's just, everything's become a little bit more complicated. Like I said, the tutorial was much more complicated, and they start you off on a hostile planet. And to see if there was a way to change that up, I kept restarting and reloading a new character to try to re-roll the planet. And it didn't matter how many times I did it, I always ended up on some sort of planet that was either overheated, it was freezing, it was toxic, something. They, in the tutorial, it seems like they want to force you into a planet that has environmental hazards to try to teach you the systems. But the problem is, it seems like they didn't really do a great job of balancing it out. And so for a newer player, if you've never played the game before, it's going to be really frustrating, I think, to get out onto that original planet and learn the basics of the game. Even though they give you the prompts right there on the screen, it's, if you've never played the game before and you have no concept of what's going on, I feel like the difficulty curve right at the start of the game is kind of ridiculous for a game like this, that they say they want it to be like a chill game. It's not hard, but for a new player, it might be enough to make them shut the game off. I don't really know why they did it. Okay, I've kind of rambled on long enough about this new update because that's not really what I'm getting to here. Long story short, if you've played the game before, if you own it, you might want to go back and check it out. There's probably going to be some things that you do like about it. I had some issues with it. I still think that the grind is too much for me to really enjoy fully because I'm more of an objective-based person, and to me, there's too much of a grind here that holds me back from actually accomplishing what I want to do in the game. So for me, I'll probably go back and play it a little bit, but I don't think I'm going to go back for too much longer. But if you like this type of game, if you like grinding games, farming simulator type games, the exploration still is good. I can't complain about that. It's still cool to land on a planet when you don't know what's going to happen and what everything's going to look like. It's landing on the planet for the first time is still a pretty cool thing. So if you want to go back and try it out, yes, I would say go back and try it out if you already own the game. If you don't own the game, I would say maybe wait until they get a couple more patches in because there still is a lot of technical problems. Like I said, I still am having crashes now, which is the same thing that was happening 2 years ago when it launched. It's just a hard crash out of the game. So maybe you want to see them smooth it out. They have said that they're going to be doing weekly patches, content updates now, so we'll see what happens. Now, for what I really want to get into with this video, and that's going to be the reception to this update and how the media and some of the people I've seen in comment sections are kind of talking about this like this is washing away everything that was ever wrong, and Sean Murray is now being held up as a paragon of virtue for some reason, and Hello Games has being viewed as having totally redeemed themselves with this update. And I gotta be honest, I'm having some trouble with this narrative, and I've seen it in a lot of articles this week, painting Hello Games and Sean Murray's as the victims. And this is something that I'm really having trouble coming to terms with. Now, I know that they got a lot of backlash for the game. I know that there was even, they've said that they had death threats, which obviously, guys, don't send death threats to a game developer. Give me a break. Obviously, not good. But I'm still having a lot of problems reconciling this in my head of where I'm being asked to act like Sean Murray and Hello Games were victims. We're talking about an independent publisher with a very small team, not even 24 people, who launched this game. Like I said before, self-published the game digitally, and we know that digital sales are outdoing physical sales across the board this generation. So they said on day one they had over 1 million people playing at a full price tag, and that's just on PlayStation because the PC didn't launch for 3 days after. So if they're saying they had over 1 million people playing on day one, guys, Hello Games made buckets of cash, especially with a staff that size. They have more than enough cash. They made plenty of money off this. Sean Murray repeatedly went on stage, it's well documented, and misled the consumers. People 2 years ago were furious. Just days before release, major outlets were still promising stuff to the public that Sean Murray had said that never ended up in the game. A lot of it until now, 2 years later. And this is just going back into this narrative of where these publishers and developers, they launch these unfinished games, and this is not even a game that was an early access game. This was launched as a full launch, $60, here's your game. Done. Bang. This was not pushed out as an early access game, which it most certainly was. And so now we're sitting here and we're being asked to act like they're the victims. And I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to let it sit well with me when I see Sean Murray in multiple interviews this week acting as well like he's the victim. Sean, let me help you out. You're not the victim. Any criticisms you took, you deserved. Because you went on stage multiple times for years on end and misrepresented your game. And you can use whatever excuse you want. Well, he's shy. Well, he's nervous. Well, Sony pressured him into doing it. Well, he was just overly optimistic about the game. Well, he thought he would be able to do it, and look, now they've delivered. Okay, all that's great. It didn't stop them from taking $60 a whack at this game at launch, and it didn't stop him from misleading everyone right up until literally 12 hours before launch, before he finally started cracking and saying, oh guys, by the way, this might not be in the game. Might not have multiplayer. He knew exactly what he was doing. He's obviously not stupid. He's part of the team that came up with this algorithm that made this game. He's not stupid. He may not be super comfortable talking to the press or comfortable in front of a lot of people, which is understandable, but he was the guy out in front. And yeah, he shouldn't have been. I think we can all agree to that. But he was the guy. The words were coming out of his mouth. He was the one misleading people. And just for the record, he also thinks that the game launched perfectly fine. He doesn't have a problem with it because he says in this interview, he says, No Man's Sky was what we wanted it to be when it launched. He goes on, if you played the original game for 20 hours, you probably got the experience that we wanted. So there you go. He doesn't even see the problem with the original game. He thought it was fine. That's the experience they wanted you to have. He says it right there. This is in The Guardian. And he goes back and he blames the fans again. He says, it was as bad as things could get. There's a smorgasbord of things that an angry mob can do. It's a crowdsourcing thing of how bad can you make someone's life. And like I said, if you're harassing him and the company directly, don't do that. But if you're just criticizing them online, if you're in a Reddit feed or a YouTube comment section criticizing them, I'm sorry, Sean, you deserved all of that you got. All the mashup videos, you deserved all of it in my mind. I'm sorry. And he goes on. He says, the internet is really good at knowing when someone has made a mistake. It's not necessarily the best at determining the most appropriate response, but it's really good at knowing when someone has messed something up. Yeah, so it's the internet's fault. It's the internet's fault that the game didn't have multiplayer. It's the internet's fault that the trailers were misleading. These are quotes from 2018, so everyone who's holding him up now as a paragon of virtue and that they've totally redeemed themselves, he hasn't learned his lesson here. He's learned not to speak to the press. He's learned that he shouldn't overpromise, but he hasn't learned. He doesn't think that he did anything wrong. He thinks that he had communication errors. He doesn't see that what he did was deceptive and misleading. He thinks he's simply overpromised. But that's not how the people who bought the game, who were really hyped, feel about it. That's not how the people who spent $60 on the game feel about it. But he doesn't really care. And they said they're going to keep updating the game, and they're very excited. And he talks about how proud he is in his team, and he goes on in all these interviews talking about how, like they're this underdog group. In a lot of ways they are. I can't really deny that they are a small studio. And yeah, like I said, once again, if people were harassing him directly, that's out of line. But people who were criticizing them and criticizing the game, they had every single right to do so. And the only thing he seems to think that he did wrong was that they shared too much information. No, it's not that you shared too much information. It's that you lied about the information you did share. You misled us. Giving us these features like multiplayer 2 years later, coincidentally, while you're relaunching the game on a new platform, because now it's coming to Xbox. So now they're relaunching the game. It's getting all this positive press now, and we're just supposed to act like the last 2 years didn't happen. And he's supposed to get all this credit, and Hello Games gets all this credit for fixing the game. And people are like, "Whoa, look at what people are." I've seen a lot of people using Bioware abandoning Mass Effect and saying, "Oh, well, Hello Games could have just done that. They could have done the same thing, and they didn't. They stuck with it." Well, there's a big difference here. Hello Games does not have the cachet that Bioware does. Bioware is making a new IP called Anthem. It's coming out in February, and millions of people are going to buy it, despite the flop that Mass Effect Andromeda was. Despite the fact that they didn't fix it. They didn't add DLC to it. They abandoned the game entirely. But millions of people are still going to buy that game. You look at a company like Gearbox, when they abandoned Battleborn, and they just stopped updating, they just walked away from it. People can point at that and be like, well, that's another publisher. They walked away from their game. They didn't update it. And Hello Games stuck with it. The difference is, Gearbox has Borderlands 3 that they can make and sell millions of copies. Hello Games doesn't have that sort of power in the industry. If they didn't sit there and fix this game, they could never realistically think of selling another IP or a sequel. And now that they've fixed it to a certain extent, now that door is open once again. So to me, I'm not going to be like, oh, they did it out of the goodness of their heart. He can say it's a passion project all he wants. Maybe it is, but it's also a business. And the business reality is, Hello Games was dead in the water if they didn't do a major update like this, if they didn't take the time to fix this. And heaven knows, well, I hear people saying, well, look at all the extra resources they poured in. Guys, they have the resources. It's a tiny team. They made millions and millions and millions of dollars. Don't talk to me about the money with them. They made the money. They made the money. So, they going in and fixing it now? Okay, great. And the update is alright. It's not bad, like I said. But I'm not going to hold this guy up. I'm not going to act like he is a victim here when it's the consumers who ended up biting the bullet. And I'm not going to be okay with Sean Murray trying to push the blame onto Sony as well, because in another interview he says, so I read this thing all the time where people blame Sony. Like, Sony brought all the hype onto the game, or Sony put loads of pressure on them to release, or whatever. I mean, that's just an obvious thing that Sony would do. That's what a publisher does. I mean, they wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't do that. I don't know what a good way to say this is, but like, we worked with Sony and we didn't have to. We didn't know what it would be like, but also maybe we should have understood. I've said to people before, if a kid gets into a cage at the zoo with a gorilla, I don't blame the gorilla, right? That's what the gorilla does. The kid does what the kid does. There was an obvious mismatch between a huge company and this tiny, tiny company that has suddenly become important. So there he goes, well, he doesn't blame Sony, and he does. He's saying, well, I can't blame them because they're just doing what a publisher would do, and they're a big company. But at the same time, he is pushing the onus onto them, saying, "Oh, well, they were forcing us to do this. They were pushing us to do this." And like I said earlier, I'm sure Sony did have a hand in pushing them. They certainly were pushing them onto the stage at E3, certainly. But again, at the end of the day, Sean Murray was the front man. He was the guy on stage. The words were coming out of his mouth. He had plenty of opportunity in interviews to directly say what was and what was not going to be in the game at launch, and he failed to do that. So that's pretty much all I have about this. This is how I feel about this game. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think I'm way off base? Have you guys played the update? Do you like the update? Like I said, I think it's kind of alright. It's pretty cool. I still think they need to work on some things. If you've never played it before, or you thinking about buying it, I don't know if I would do that right away. Maybe I would wait for a sale. But what do you guys think? Let me know. I'm Coach Toolshed, and as always, keep it turned to 11. Oh, and for anyone who's looking for more Fallout news, don't worry about it. I'm still going to be following Fallout. I just don't think that there's going to be too much news coming up in the next week or so. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think they're probably holding back everything that they want for QuakeCon, which is going to be coming up on the 10th of August. Todd Howard's supposed to be doing another, presentation for Fallout 76. So I don't think we're going to be getting too much more info from there, but don't worry, I am not abandoning that. I will get back to you on that. Talk to you later.